Hello, ladies and gentlemen. A good afternoon yet again. Welcome to this edition of the Youth Roundtable here at Civ Space TV. Today we are discussing a thing that we don't often discuss, but one that is now getting in the news, and that's radicalization of young people in relation to the terrorism that we've seen rock this country last week. So with me is a panel of distinguished ladies and distinguished gentlemen and a lady, whom I'll first begin by asking to introduce themselves, starting at the other end.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Geoffrey Chanwat. I am a lawyer by training, and I work with Strategic Response International. Great to be here.
Thank you very much, Comrade Godwin. My name is Kidega Moses. I am the Secretary for Labor and Works of the National Youth Council, and I'm also a resident panelist here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Toko, for having me. I am Hawa Kimbugwe, a passionate poet and extremely together young leader, Uganda chapter. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much, everyone. And Sadat, Zaga, Ziwaa. I'm part of the Extremely Together Young Leaders, and at the same time, I co-founded and head a civil society organization called Ngabo Youth Friendly Services Center. I'm happy to be part of this conversation.
Thank you, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as you can see. So I am Godwin Toko Abunia, and I am the host for this conversation. And before going any further now, I want us to understand that the subject we are going to discuss is technical, and as far as we can, we are going to avoid getting to the technicalities. If you want any information, the police and those other people in charge are going to give you that kind of information. What we'll discuss is what we know. As you've already noticed, this is a panel of young people. We live with young people, we are young people, and we stay with young people. So we're going to understand the aspect of radicalization of young people, how they get there, how they are brought in to fight other men's wars, to the extent that they are willing to commit suicide and become suicide bombers just to achieve somebody else's intention. That's what we're going to discuss. So, and knowing that we had a terrorist attack last week, I just want to understand from our panel how that very attack, what they saw, or what they had, or what they read later, and how it affected them. So let's begin with Mr. Zaga here. Zaga, when you heard that there was a terrorist attack in Uganda, when you saw those gruesome photos, saw the plumes and the smoke going up in the air and people running crazy in town, what exactly did you feel and how did that affect you?
Definitely, it reminded me the 2010 bombing in Lugogo Cricket Oval, and also it reminded me of the tough times I've been reading about during the coming of the NRM government. So, and to me, it didn't really mean sense, because I know at the end of the day, such bombings are going to target the Islam as a faith. So to me, when I saw the bloodsheds and everything, I was just asking myself, then who could be this Muslim guy this time around? Because that is the notion around.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's move to Hawa.
Yeah, for me, it was a bit disarming. Extremely Together Uganda partners with an organization called Uganda Muslim Youth Development Forum. And the identity or the reason why the Uganda Muslim Youth Development Forum organization was begun or was founded, it was after the twin blasts that happened in 2010 that Zaga just mentioned, the Ethiopian village and the Chadondo in 2010. And these, the co-founders happened to be in that World Cup. So when this thing happened, they are the first people that came to mind, because they happened at the same time. CPS and at Parliamentary Avenue. And I'm like, okay, this is traumatizing. Like, it's very easy, like whatever happens to us this side, because I'm a Muslim and I happen to face the demise all the time. Like if I'm seated somewhere, even the way they check me. But the thing is, for the victims, the people that have lost lives, and the people that have had these experiences live, reliving these experiences is something that's not easy to come by. And with all the work that Extremely Together has done, and also UMIDF has done to contribute to preventing violent extremism and also peace building, this was a bit shaky for us. It feels like we are now back to square one.
Oh.
Yeah.
Kidega, over to you.
Thank you very much. Of course, that particular incident to me was very unfortunate, and on my own behalf and on behalf of the National Youth Council of Uganda, we really commemorate with the families of the deceased, and we hope that our government and the institutions in charge of national security can take this with serious concern and do what they have to do. But also, this particular incident to me reminds me of the words of Daniel Gilbert, who one time said that that terrorism is like a theater, and terrorists rely on the dramatic impact of their actions to magnify the effects of whatever they're doing. So to me, yes, whereas I agree that terror is a threat and it's here with us, I also think that there are great challenges that we are facing as a nation or as a globe that we are not looking into with keen concern and detail. Because when you look at, for example, global warming in itself, it is causing deaths across the globe, across the country. But because these deaths are they are unintentional, they happen subconsciously, they are usually not recognized. So to me, that is the kind of balance we find ourselves in. But I must say it is very unfortunate what happened, and we look forward to doing better as a country.
All right, Chanwat, over to you.
Thank you very much, Godwin. Unfortunately, we can't smile about this. It was a terrific experience. Personally, it got me trying to save life. At the time of the blast, I had actually taken my grandmother for vaccination, and then I get to my phone. I realized that, okay, there's news coming in that there's been an explosion. Then a few minutes later, another one. Then, of course, the internet is always awash of images. Yeah, so it's a very sad one for not just Ugandans, but the world at large. Terrorism is something that we should not let to take our lead in terms of trying to achieve change in whichever way we want. Yeah, it's a very unfortunate thing. Like many Ugandans, whoever lost their lives was trying to move to look for a livelihood. I personally, my mother goes to the market on a daily, and she could have been a victim, or any other human being, any other individual. So it's a sad thing that we should never accept, and I really want to sympathize with the families and any other Ugandan that lost their life. It's really sad.
Okay, Zaga, the kind of work you do, you interact with young people. I want you to help us define, in your line of work, what violent extremism is and how that comes into play with what we have seen concerning the terrorism. Then Hawa will help us define terrorism.
Okay, thank you so much once again. In my line of duty, and that is serving the young people, but more especially serving the ghetto people. I prefer saying the ghetto people because these are individuals that feel hopeless, feel excluded, feel marginalized, feel everything. So they don't have a meaning to tag on to the government at the end of the day. So I work with such individuals to basically provide hope and widen opportunities for them. According to the question, when you look at violence extremism, it simply means how individuals cherish their beliefs against the other. They believe so much in their existence and they compare themselves as worth living than the other. So at the end of the day, these beliefs could be cultural, could be regional, could be national, could be, it depends, because what lures people into the extreme violence is what they believe in. For example, if today, like the slogan is ghetto in Uganda, once these individuals truly believe that they don't have any benefit from this government, it is easier for them to be lured to conduct such brutal, massive killings. Because for them, they believe they are the ones to lead, they are the ones to exist, they are the ones to take whatever opportunity. So that is the extreme end of people believing so much into what they believe in. Could be witchcraft. For example, I'll give an example, the times of Kimbugwe Joseph. That was extremism because this individual was able to lure people into a context of believing that they should not live beyond 2000. And it made them believe that at the end of the day, they are going to face God and they are going into the paradise, of which paradise they had not tasted before. And even Kimbugwe didn't know. So, but because for him, he wanted them to sell off their land, their property, and he collected all the wealth to him. It was his way of killing all what could be the witnesses at the end of the day. So he used that opportunity to kill each and every one. So that is, in a nutshell, violence extremism is conducting violence because of your certain belief and believing that for you, you're the only person to exist.
Okay. How I want to understand how we relate now violent extremism and the aspect of terrorism, and then you can relate that with what we see in Uganda.
Okay. Violent extremism, like Zaga has said, is someone cherishing a belief, or a group of people or group of individuals cherishing a belief that their ideologies, whether religious, cultural, or political, are what is, and they are anti anything else that's not theirs. So terrorism is a form of violent extremism. But violent extremism is not a form of terrorism. While despite the fact that while terrorism is a form of violent extremism, terrorism happens at a large scale. It's usually happening to a country. It can be transnational. It can be to an attack, an intimidating attack on a country or an international organization, or it's a broader. The example he's given of Chiwetere will happen within the country, but it may not shake the entire country. But terrorism, like how this happened, this is an act of terror. Even when it's violent extremism, it's an act of terror. It's an act of they didn't get a particular sect of people that they've bombed a mosque, maybe, or gone to a church. It's the city center. The person came to CPS and just had a bomb explosion. So anyone who was in that area, whether you're Muslim, Christian, or whatever tribe you're in, if you were around that area, you probably have been injured or you passed on.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Kidega, at the National Youth Council where you serve currently, do you guys look at such aspects of life, how possibly the youth can easily get exploited, recruited, and then radicalized, and then they become the kind of killing machines that we now seem to have in our midst?
Thank you once again, Godwin. Let me start by once again re-echoing what Daniel Gilbert one time said, that terrorism is like a theater, and terrorists rely on the dramatic impact of their actions to magnify the effect of whatever they're doing. So that means that terrorists are occasionally deliberate with what they do. But even before we go there, let me first draw some historical perspective into this conversation, because terrorism over time has evolved. And to enable us understand this, I would draw knowledge from chapter 8 of a book I've read, which is entitled Understanding Global Conflict and Cooperation. Chapter 8 of this book will try to help us understand that terrorism has evolved over time. We shall recall that Al-Qaeda, in its first attempt to attack the USA, it failed because they were using primitive means, and that because they had overloaded the ship with explosives, the ship ended up sinking. But terrorism has evolved from using primitive means to now using sophisticated and technology. But also, terrorism is now no longer only a national issue, but now it is multinational in nature. Gone are the days where terrorists would only target a given country. Today, they look at targeting multinations. And to this effect, we all remember in 1987, where the globe witnessed the largest level of multinational terrorism, where over 4,000 lives were accounted to terrorism. So it has had a great history, and it continues to evolve by time. But also, I want to speak to the intentions of terrorism, because I think it's very important that we understand why terrorists actually do the things they do. One, I think terrorists in this modern day and era do this in attempts to undermine democracy and sovereignty of certain countries and states. Because, for example, I'll still go back to the September 11th, 2001 bombing of the Pentagon of USA.
The World Trade Towers and Pentagon.
Yes. We saw that a few months later, George Walker Bush declared war on terror. Okay? But his declaration was challenged by the Congress because it was seen as undemocratic. The same regime or the same president attempted to influence the foreign policy of the USA, in the sense that, for example, we shall recall that they introduced what the Operation Enduring Freedom, where they launched superpowers and used airstrikes to topple the Taliban regime in Afghanistan and destroy Al-Qaeda infrastructure. Okay, whereas this particular endeavor was welcomed by the international community and had the UN mandate, we saw that in their subsequent attempts to deal with terrorism, their efforts were challenged and not welcomed by the international community. For example, when they attempted the Operation Iraqi Freedom, where the National Security Council of America declared that they will establish detention centers like the Guantanamo Bay in Cuba, this was seen as an act that is contrary to the principles of democracy, contrary to the principles of individual freedoms and rule of law. So you can see that some of these terror attacks are deliberate on undermining democracies and undermining sovereignty and the will of the people. So I think that for us, where we sit as the National Youth Council, definitely our voice or our argument is that we discourage young people participating in such acts of extremism and violence. But also, we can only do so much. Like Comrade here was saying, that for as long as the socio-economic situation is still dire, young people are going to find themselves becoming vulnerable and becoming baits and becoming victims of being used by these selfish individuals to orchestrate terror and cause violence. So I think as a party or as a sitting government, we must continuously address the issue of the socio-economic inequality that exists. Only then shall we be able to control young people from being desperate and involving themselves in these simple and unfortunate acts of terror.
Okay. Brian, Kidega has brought in a very technical aspect, and I must say that one I was trying to avoid. We know for a fact that Nelson Mandela was once a terrorist. He was on CIA's list of terrorists. Che Guevara was a terrorist. If Museveni fought his war today, he would have been called a terrorist, right? And everyone participating in that war probably. Is looking at the politics of terrorism, yeah? Is this something that is more of the name calling? Can it, like they say, one man's terrorist is probably another man's freedom fighter? Is that what we see with the terrorism in Uganda? Could it be that those who are fighting have legitimate concerns, yeah, that they're trying to get the attention of government to address, and the government is failing? How do you see it from where you sit?
Well, thank you for that question. I want to agree with you that the statement that one man's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter actually holds a lot of water. I must tell you that these terrorists that you see, to them, they believe it's a very genuine cause, and they will do anything to achieve it. So by the time someone decides to explode, meaning there's life lost there, then it's a very genuine cause. Forgetting about the religious sentiments that are being attached, that there's heaven and all that stuff, or even the money attached, that someone who explodes has probably left $1 billion shillings for their family. We cannot rule that out. We cannot either way believe it's true. However, like you said, it's about the name calling. I must say that, like Kidega, comrade here mentioned the evolution, terrorism has since transformed. Back in the day, a terrorist attack would come from out. Yeah, maybe there would be some non-citizens who come into the country and commit such an offense. Now, it has evolved that it is each country's citizen that actually may subscribe to such a belief. So we cannot say that what they're doing is wrong or what they're doing is right, but beliefs matter. I want to bring in the element of human rights. We all have our freedoms. You can express yourself in whichever way. The law, of course, governs that. But sometimes individuals are overpowered by these, I want to call them strong beliefs, either attached to religion, either attached to a political side, and all that. But the politics of terrorism comes in when fingers are being pointed at, various key players. For instance, Uganda now, we have the ADF being brought in. ADF is actually fighting the government, if at all that's what they're fighting for anyway. We've had so many other militias and other groups. We have groups in Karamoja, they're equally fighting, right? But to what extent does this become terror? Yeah. So we need to see how we can address to know, like our colleagues over there. I think they're more well versed with the extremism and then the terror. Like one is a subset of the other, but the other is not. So at what stage do we as a country get to define that? What is the interest of this group? What do they want? Because these terror suspects here, they could have chosen a much more crowded place, yeah? But they chose to go, I don't know if they want to say that was strategic. Of course, CPS, one of the most secure places, hardcore criminals are kept there. And then also very close to Parliament. So what is the message that they're sending? So it has literally evolved from killing large numbers just to prove a message or to prove a point, to rather targeting key installations. Yeah? Because I am very sure these guys didn't just say, why should we leave Chikubo and go the other side? So there are certain things that we need to address. What is the message they're sending? So that is where the politics come in. So unless we define or we get to accept the fact that these guys here have a genuine cause, which may not be genuine to the sitting government, but we need to, then we can actually know that there is actually terror and then extremism. So for me, I think it's just an interrelation between the politics of who is sitting in government and how your interests are not being met, of course, socio-economic and all that, vis-a-vis what you want to provide or as the alternative. So that is the politics around this whole issue of terrorism. Yeah, it applies, it cuts across even in the developed states.
Okay,
yeah.
So everyone almost has mentioned the aspect of socio-economic political exclusion, or the feel of socio-economic and political exclusion of certain groups that then pushes them into actions that we call terrorism. Zaga, just how bad does it take? How bad does one's socio-economic and political exclusion come to the point that they say, okay, let me go and blow myself up at this point in time? I mean, we've seen borders. There was one in Masaka who inflamed himself, he bought petrol and burnt himself just because they confiscated his motorbike and asked for 50,000, the policeman, and he burnt himself. We've seen this in other countries. Bouaziz in Algeria, the person that eventually started the Arab Spring, must have been Tunisia. He burned himself because a female police officer confiscated his merchandise. Now, when we see, at what point in Uganda does one say, enough is enough? Yeah, we are so poor, we've been so secluded, we've been so excluded politically. Let me go and blow up these people. What drives them to that extent?
Thank you so much. Good enough you've brought in an example that is so key to define the early warning signs of this kind of violence. Uganda has had lessons, I might say. We've had lessons, but I think we are just reluctant to learn. Because from the border guy flaming himself in Masaka, to the other incidences of Nakivubo Blue, where a young person, Kilecha Nkuba, tried also, and the rest, those were enough early warning signs to start planning interventions that can counter such kind of beliefs. Because by the virtue that someone reach an extent of flaming himself to death, this is a better terrorist as well. That signal is enough for the security agency to appreciate that there is a problem somewhere. The problem we have in Uganda is that almost every person within the urban suburb feels tired with the exclusions, the injustices, especially when it comes to the basic human rights. Let me give an example. You imagine a community where people just survive to have just a meal in a day, and they don't consider issues, or they disregard issues of accommodation, and they are just after chasing to eat. If I eat, it is done. Then they don't ask questions of how am I going to sleep. And at the end of the day, you will find them in trenches, in everything, and they are trying to survive. So such categories of individuals, if they are living a life where they feel they are hopeless, they don't have any hope in them, it is very easy to lure them into terrorism. It is very easy to lure them into political terrorism. It is very easy to lure them in anything, be it prostitution. Because at the end of the day, for them, they want to survive. So, and this is the biggest population. Who asks themselves about the many young Karamajongs that fill up the streets of Kampala begging? Who asks the question where they go when they grow up?
Or where they actually sleep.
Or where they are? Who asks? And you think they all die? Or they all get married and good jobs? Then for those who have not been able to get good jobs, where are they? Who asks? We have very many young people boarding trucks every day from Masaka, from where coming to Kampala to the city. And where do they go? You will find them either in Kisenyi, Katwe, Kamocha, Kabalagala, Kisugu, Kinawataka, those cases. You will find them there because it is cheap and easy to integrate, mingle, and live there. So at the end of the day, they are just surviving. But just know that we have interest of the different terrorist actors. So at the end of the day, these are young people that are lured into Islam, and someone pretends as if he is going to take them to school. Personally, I was once lured to terrorism. The only thing was I failed to cross the border to Kenya, but I was going to the upper parts of Turkana. And this Somali friend was telling me there are jobs here because I felt no meaning in my life in Uganda. And this young person was telling me, man, you're going to be richer just within a few months. There are good monies in Kenya. And he gave me the whole lots of stories. So, and I was willing to cross over. But reaching the border, I didn't have the crossing permit. So, and the guy went, I also walked back to Kampala. Just imagine I'd gotten an opportunity of crossing. So, and there are very many young people just living under that kind of desperate life. And people just are yearning for a savior. And their savior could be this individual who promises them heaven on earth. Then for him, his intention is to lure them into terrorism.
Zach, I'm going to ask you a question. You mentioned the aspect of your Somali friend. Uganda seems like a very cosmopolitan country lately. We're having people coming in from Ethiopia. We're having refugees from as far as Afghanistan. We're having Congolese refugees, South Sudanese refugees. We have all these people who, due to our, can I say, the good side of us, the hospitality we have as a country and the sitting government, we bring all of them and integrate them within us. Your friend Huluwad, you said is Somali.
Yeah.
Is this going to be problematic for us, maybe in the long run? The fact that we are bringing in all these people with all their different cultures probably from us, could they harbor some terrorists among them, or it's not one of the worries that we should have?
The question would have been, do we diagnose the intentions of these individuals that come to our land? Because at the end of the day, everyone has an intention. There are individuals that just run away maybe from their countries with the intentions of terror. There are those that are just seeking for refuge in here. So we don't have that modality of, diagonizing to know whose intentions are right or wrong. But at the end of the day, our hospitality is going to cause us problems at the end of the day. Okay. Because we we take in whoever comes in, but we don't know to what extent do they cherish their beliefs. For example, now, the South Sudan, we have more of the Dinkas, the Nuers, the so-called from Sudan. But you realize that even when they are here, you will find some Dinkas are also infringing on the rights of other South Sudanese within the country. And they are causing problems because for them they feel superior. Because when you go to South Sudan, the Dinkas feel superior than everyone else. So for them they believe it is only their tribe to lead and to exist. Imagine they are here in Uganda fighting.
Okay.
Isn't that a problem to us? When you go to Somali, for them, we have groups like the Al-Shabaab. Al-Shabaab, for them, their belief is they think they are fighting to be rewarded by God, Allah, which is not the case. And for them, they think, because just of recent, we had a conversation as Extremely together with our colleagues from Somalia. And for them, some of them were surprised to see most of our ladies not veiling. What does that mean to a Somali who is living here and seeing this woman not veiling, crossing over, maybe could be passing within their premises in Kisenyi? What do you think is getting to their mind? So I think hospitality is good, but we also need to unpack our beliefs as a country to them, and as well also understand how better do we work with them, and as well protect their interests, but in return also letting them appreciate that we need to coexist, because this is not their country. So like now we have the Taliban. You think the Taliban are going to be more happy seeing people putting on miniskirts and what have you, like the way it is in Uganda?
No.
Some of them look at you and they just say, oh, Allahu Akbar, Astaghfirullah, like that. Do you know the meaning to each and every word? If you know the meaning, do you know the kind of spirit they own while saying or speaking such? So at the end of the day, it is a problem to us. I don't say that Uganda should stop giving refuge to these individuals, but then we need to set standards, because at the end of the day, we are going to lose our own people.
Okay. Let's move to the lady on this distinguished panel. Hawa, the aspect of religion. I'm sure you read quite a lot. Yuval Noah says in 21 Lessons of the 21st Century that religion can actually prevent people from doing a lot of bad things. But then he says that there's a caveat to that religion can actually become also a force for doing a lot of bad things, depending on who holds and who teaches or who learns how the religion. So Islam seems to be repeatedly mentioned in these terror things. We've seen almost every suspect being arrested is a Muslim. The ones who, unfortunately, the police say they had to defend themselves against and killed happen to be Muslims. The terror organizations in question here, ADF, Islamic State, all seem to be linked or claiming to have affiliations to the religion of Islam. Is it time that government of Uganda started reviewing religions and looking at how they conduct their business for the good of the citizens of Uganda?
Wow. Okay, that's a very sensitive
Okay, that's
question.
wait. let me unpack it a bit. We also know that there has been what we could have described as terrorism on the Christian aspect of religion in Uganda. The LRA, the L in the LRA stands for Lord's Resistance Army. Konyi was once a catechist. Yeah, they fought a very, very costly war in northern Uganda. Alice Lakwena said she was fighting for God. Our front was called, there was is it Christian Salvation something front that came as far as Jinja before it was repulsed and the members beaten. What Chiwetere did could have been described as terrorism. And Chiwetere had nothing to do with Islam. He had everything to do with Christianity. So let's look at this not in the sense of Islam alone, but let's put it in the sense of religion.
Of course, I mean, I got the religion context, but still it's a very sensitive question, because when people identify with a certain tribe, a certain culture, a certain political party, there is always something, something deep with that. And I think I'm going to go back to what this comrade said and what he described. Okay, what they described, and that's what we call radicalization in the violent extremist aspect. He talked about how when someone is going to do an act of terror, they have genuine concerns.
Yes.
Now, the feeling of someone actually having genuine concerns, and he was talking about the early warning signs of radicalization. Of if someone is being radicalized, it means they are starting to believe that their concerns or their beliefs are the only thing that has to be accepted, and they are being more resistant to any other person with a different view of things, or different perspective, or different ideology. Now, when someone is radicalized, there are different factors. There are different factors that get someone into radicalization. And one of these factors, of course, we've talked about the socioeconomic inequality, and we've also talked about marginalization. Plus, in Uganda, there is a massive criminalization of youth. Everything, I mean, whenever a crime comes up, even before they've proved someone guilty, it's usually the youth. And that brings me to the religion. There is what we call the pyramid of hate. And on the pyramid of hate, the bottom, where it starts is bias. We are being raised in a world that has different biases. Some are, culture, some are religion, and people have a certain bias with Islam, not with Islam, with Muslims, because these are the people they've been, like all the names that are in the media, or all the names that front terrorists, I mean, Al-Shabaab, then Boko Haram, then like Al-Qaeda, then the Taliban, like everything it sounds Islamic. It's Arabic, but it sounds Islamic. And so sometimes people do not even get to understand probably who are these people, or where do they come from, or are they really Muslims? So there is already an underlying bias. And we all know that bias is like a stereotype. You've not confirmed it, but you've heard it, you've seen it, so you just think it is the truth, or you take it for the fact. I believe religion faces, in the Islamic perspective, I think Muslims have faced the demise of people not differentiating an individual or a group of individuals who carry out an act of terror or a violent extremist act with the religion itself.
Okay.
That while the religion may say something else, the practitioners of a religion will be judged by the religion and not as individuals, which luckily Kony is not. When Kony kills people, they will not say that catechists are terrorists. They will say Kony, who heads LRA, is a rebel. And that's the demise that Muslims face. When the bomb blast happened on Tuesday, on Wednesday I went to a police station, and I was wearing baggy pants and a shirt dress with a belt and a veil. So I just entered with my phone, a phone. I didn't even have a bag. And then there were two policemen and a lady, and I greeted them, and I'm like, can I please talk to the in charge? And then they were like, what have you come to do? They were very rude even in the way they addressed me. So I told them, you can shake me. Like, come and shake me if you think I have any problem. And then they really continued with being rude, yeah? And then I told them, are you actually addressing me?
Is that, I mean, police officers tend to be rude.
No.
Everyone in Uganda.
It was deliberate because I entered with someone. Okay. And I've noticed it over time. Even when I enter a place with my backpack, like, they check my backpack and ask, even after they've checked, they ask, I hope there is no bomb. And it has happened to me. I won't mention the places, but they're in the city center, and it has happened to me more than 3 times.
Okay.
So now, lucky for me, I'm used to it. It doesn't even offend me. Now I even, you know how Ugandans commicize misery, and I'm a Ugandan, so I commicize it. So usually the people I'm with, they're like, Hawa, that wasn't right. But I also know it comes from like the Islamophobia that has been spread on the media.
Okay.
And it's coming back to, how he said his Somali friend was the one luring him into was the potential recruiter for him to be a violent extremist. I feel like as a country, as families, as individuals, and as communities, we need to, Martin Luther King says that the people that are preparing, or the people that want peace in the world, should prepare for it like the people who want war prepare for war. And I think that is where we go wrong. We back more on the counter and yet we would do more with the preventing.
Absolutely.
Maybe the preventing terrorism, preventing violent extremism. Yet we bank more on the countering violent extremism or countering terrorism. Because in countering, now for example, these twin blasts that just happened, the government is what can do much, or the police, or investigation and all those things. People that have the power to use forensics and track who did what, and then they'll put it will be a no-go area for some time because they have to actually find out what happened.
Yeah.
So as a community, what do we have to do? One, we have to understand what the biases we have. Some of the things that Muslims have experienced in the country are not because they are all guilty. It's because of a certain few individuals who carried out things, and now all the other Muslims who even have no idea what extremism is are facing the demise. And it happens with even any other tribe or any other religion. I think we should work on the biases that we have as communities, and also build community resilience. Community resilience in such a way that when you're addressing someone, or when someone does something to you, do not address them as tribe. Like for example, there was during the elections, there was that there was violent extremism happening during election time. You saw, and then there was a bit of tribalism, that these are these are Westerners and these are Central people, and there is that fiction. So sometimes you'll find that there is a Westerner who is actually being victimized, yet they are not benefiting from the sitting government. But because everyone feels like it is that, they generalize it. So I believe we should work on dealing with people as individuals, and then also try to notice signs of radicalization in the communities we are living in. If your child starts to be very they don't listen to other people's views, other people's arguments, they are very isolating, you see them going into the discrimination. Because terrorism does not happen overnight, or recruitment does not happen overnight.
Yeah.
Someone is going to come to you and say, oh, by the way, you're broke. I have a deal. You go get that person out of life, I'm going to give you 200,000. This person is poor, not broke. There is being broke and being poor. They are seeing this as a life savior. That is like, that 200,000 shillings can save my life. My mom is starving, my child is, starving. So that alone can get them, If this person is trained, and maybe their mindset about violent extremism, or they know about peace, they know about violence, they know when they are being radicalized, even when they have this challenge, they will not easily succumb to the recruitment because they know better. But because they don't know better, they are easily lured in. I mean, there are pull factors and push factors into violent extremism. If I don't have a sense of belonging, I feel marginalized, I am criminalized, even when I'm innocent. Trust me, even when I'm innocent, trust me, I'll be like, you know what?
After all.
Where am I living? Where am I even existing in the first place? Let me go bomb myself, get this money. My people, that Godwin and Zaga, will use it. Let me go and be their Jesus. Die for their sins. You see, yeah? And I think we should actually work more on that. Community resilience and preventive mechanisms to violent extremism.
Let's move to Comrade Kidega. Comrade Kidega, you mentioned the aspect of socio-economic and political exclusion, the poverty we see within our midst, and Zaga mentioned that. Almost everyone here actually has mentioned that. We know that with COVID, these things seem to even get worse. Yeah? More people have lost their jobs, more parents are unable to feed their children. People that would get solace from churches and mosques, their movement there were restricted and still is restricted now. People are now within themselves. They're looking for solutions that they can and must only get within themselves. So as, for instance, the National Youth Council, how then do you come into this? How do you help the young people to overcome the challenges that they're facing now that make them so vulnerable and easy targets for recruitment into these acts that we all agree are despicable?
Thank you, Godwin. Before I get there, let me first make a comment to what my sister said. You see, there is something called the state, and when people elect a government, they empower it with the tools of state, and a government or a sitting regime has a responsibility to its citizens to protect their lives and property. So at times when the state becomes maybe overzealous, or maybe they become extremely conscious or vigilant, I think it's for the common good. And when at times, yes, I believe that we all have rights to, you know, express ourselves and, you know, liberties and freedoms. But at times, if your individual freedom infringes on the freedoms of the general good, then at times the state can become extremely vigilant to see that the common good is protected. But back to the question of the economy and the socio-economic.
That is a bit problematic.
I know.
I don't even understand.
What you have said is a
where
bit
it's coming
problematic.
from.
No, I mean,
Because what I would say is the state has a right to protect everybody's collective interests.
yes.
You understand? So if the state repeatedly, in doing so, looks like it is victimizing, yeah, that becomes
Certain
problematic.
Yeah.
That's why we say that democracy means majority rule and minority rights. That you guys can vote, 99% of you can vote a particular government, and I don't vote for that government. But that means that you also respect my right, the fact that I didn't vote for that government, and treat me as a human being. I don't know if you get what I'm saying.
Well, I think you're getting my argument out of context. What I meant to say is that the state has an obligation to its people, which is to protect their lives and their properties.
That's true.
So at times when certain actions expose the common population or the common good to a given threat, then at times the state must come in to be more vigilant and more constraining to curb or to prevent those possible effects.
Okay, maybe now to
towards
understand you
happening.
better. What particular thing did you say that you're trying to refer to?
No, at times when the state is maybe suspicious of something, you know, at times they can be given the leeway to be more vigilant and to maybe caution you and ask you extra questions because they're trying to be vigilant and they're trying to be, you know, protective of the common good.
I think asking
So
questions
I don't
is
think it
not a
was.
problem.
I don't think it is done in
Because
bad faith.
what she said is
It's
that
not
you
asking
check my
the
bag,
questions that's the problem.
but
That-
because you see
that
I'm
tone.
veiling, then you say, is there a bomb? Right after you've checked and seen that
Yeah.
there's no bomb. That for me sounds like an insult at that particular point in time.
Well,
or unfairly, being unfairly targeted.
Well, I don't speak for the police, or neither do I speak for that particular state apparatus. But what I can say is that
Okay,
we have all-
just a question, like, would you think that is right? Would you think that is wrong? Should it be right for me, clad in a kanzu, with a small bag, a policeman checks my bag, or even if it were you, checks your bag, you're just clad in your Muslim wear, but you're not a Muslim, for instance, and you're trying to go to Makere for Muslim function. They check your bag, then they say, I hope there's no bomb. And you clearly see that this is because I am clad in a kanzu. They've never done this before. So what she's saying is that she has learned to live with that, but that feels bad. And that's all she's saying.
I want to
think
agree with
we-
you. I want to agree with you that it isn't right, okay? But at the same time, it is her who was giving us so many examples of the Al-Qaedas and of the Al-Shabaabs and aligning them to the Muslim faith. So the general narrative is out there. So when a state operative tries to be more vigilant, at times it is informed by the general notion as she has clearly put it out. But anyway, I think that is a little diversionary.
Maybe
You
I
had
just-
asked me a question about the
Let him say
social...
something, then you
Yeah, just to, I think, Kidega, your point is in good faith. However, you're still emphasizing the bias against a certain group.
Yes.
Yeah, it's as simple as that. Yeah. So the bias is against a certain group that dresses in such a way that even after checking them, there has to be a follow-up question. Do you have a bomb? So literally asking, maybe you've left it outside and we've not seen it here. So that's the
And
kind of
I
context.
would think like it's very unserious for a police officer to think that a Muslim, knowing that most terrorists claim to be Muslims,
Yeah.
will come clearly showing that he's a Muslim. like, wouldn't it be a bit of guise? If I want to go and blow you up, and I'm a Catholic, and Catholics are blowing people up, I'll try to not look like a Catholic. At that point, I'm blowing you up.
Yeah.
I don't know if you get what I'm trying to say.
Well,
Yeah, but that's a good one. Let's continue.
well, let me just continue with the question you had asked.
Mm.
The issue of the socioeconomic inequality that exists. I want to add my voice to saying that yes, there is actually an inequality.
Yes.
Uganda runs what you'd call a dual economy, that you have a group of old and extremely rich, and they control maybe the factors of production, and this maybe accounts for less than 10% of the country's population.
Yeah.
Then you have this other group of young and extremely poor, and they're desperate, and they're in this dire situation that accounts for almost 90% of the country's population. So the socioeconomic inequality, yes, it exists in the country. And I also agree that this has forced young people into situations of desperation, into situations where they can stoop so low for anything,
True.
for as long as they can get a meal onto that table. But also, I want to say that the challenges of our economic situation, Uganda is not experiencing these challenges in isolation.
True.
Okay, when you go to Kenya, when you go to Kibera, you go to Mathari, you know, all those slums, people are facing these challenges. So we shouldn't discuss it like we are in the worst case. These are challenges that exist, not only in Uganda, but everywhere. But that is not to justify their existence. I think as a people, we can do more. We can have a more productive society, a more productive community, where our young people don't fall a victim or don't become a bait towards these hanging, you know, opportunities. Yeah. But also, really, back to the whole argument of terrorism and what I think really needs to be done. I think our government is more reactionary than they invest in sustainable planning and, you know, counter-terrorism. You'll recall that in 2009, Barack Obama dropped the whole war to terror, war on terror argument. He said that we cannot continuously approach terrorism from a more Massicilian and a more, you know, aggressive point of view, because terror is all about intelligence. It's about gathering intelligence and using it to the best way to counter-react terrorism. But to the contrary, when I hear our state operatives saying that we have put these suspects out of action, then how will you gather the information and intelligence? Okay? So I think our approach as a country really is not one that is sustainable. It's not one that that really enables us to solve the problem. I think as a people, we must adopt more sustainable and invest more in intelligence gathering rather than using the hard power and, you know, using all these military machinery to address these challenges.
Okay, thank you. We'll have Chanwat and then go for the break. Chanwat, the aspect of rights, yeah, the aspect of freedom, civil liberties in this. As soon as the bomb blast went off, we've had the police, using Kidega's words, we've put out of action. The family says, oh, he was actually handcuffed. You subdued him, you surrounded the house, it was 5 a.m., you got him out of bed, he never had a weapon with him. Then the government says, no, he actually tried to fight back, and we put him out of action. So, and then there are those who say that given the threat of terrorism that now exists, government is probably going to go more into privacy of rights through surveillances and other aspects that infringe rights. They'll probably not even allow us to sit the way we are sitting, saying that terrorists may strike you. They're looking for numbers. Yeah. So how worried are you as a human rights lawyer when you look at the aspect of civil liberties, rights in the aspect of this terrorism that we're facing right now?
Thanks, Godwin. I must say that it is really sad. It is really bad. We have a legal regime, a very strong one for that matter. We have courts of law. We have all other infrastructure to resolve any offenses related to terror or even these small or petty other offenses. The fact that the state, by the state I mean the organs such as the police, has taken on a hands-on approach. It's more of an execution now, that you are identified and eventually you're put out of action, in the words of Kidega and other people who have used it before him. So it's really worrying. It's really worrying that we're ignoring our own infrastructure, which we duly respect, which we duly believe can resolve these issues. I think the approach that the government or the people that are doing these killings are taking is really wrong. We've noticed that the people who have been killed are not the first terror suspects.
No, they're not.
They are terror suspects that have been arrested before, and they are still languishing in prisons. Their cases haven't even been disposed of. So the delay in access to justice maybe is one thing that is worrying to them, that even if we get these guys, we take them to court, court will probably take another 10 years, you know, to try to credit or discredit the kind of act that they did. So it's really worrying. It's really worrying for human rights practitioners, human rights defenders, the fact that the right to life, which is primary in our constitution, the freedoms of association, the freedoms of expression, the freedoms on any religion is really being undermined. It's really digging to the, you know, it's more of a complete breach of what we hold so high, which is our constitution, however much it has been amended in several ways. So it's very worrisome. I think there's more we need to do. We need to remind our stakeholders that we still have rights. Even these terrorists have rights, because they're individuals in one way or the other. So we need to re-emphasize the need to follow our legal regime, we need to follow our courts of laws, the procedures therein, in order to achieve justice. One person killing another does not mean that there has to be a counter death to fill the gap. I mean, a wrong and a wrong don't make a right. So if we follow our legal regime, it is going to be much better to see how we can resolve these issues here. But also I wanted to go back on the issue of terrorism. I think what we are being misled on is that terrorists come in openly. As a matter of fact, a terrorist will live next to you for many years, you won't even notice. You will only see them on TV that, hey, so this guy, your immediate neighbor, and that is the disguise under which they are living. They are normal individuals like you and I. They are ordinary Ugandans like everyone else. So we need to get this thing that there is a special breed of these people. Yeah, you see when I see bugs being targeted, how many people had bugs on around CPS that day and they were walking? We cannot know. I'm sure there are millions of people, even those who have just bought brand new ones. How many people are riding on the bike on a border along Parliamentary Avenue? So there is no way we are going to say that these people come in a certain uniform, or they have a beard, or they dress in a certain way, they are veiled like my sister here. No, these are ordinary Ugandans, just like you and I. I could be dressed like this when I have a suicide vest on me, yeah, but I don't reflect anything. So we need to get the notion that we keep on objectifying or identifying these individuals by saying that long bearded man could be a problem. This guy, I think we need to suspect him. No, let everybody live their life, let everybody do, and we focus on more informative things such as the intelligence that you mentioned here, comrade. I think that is where the government needs to invest its infrastructure in terms of getting information and how to counter all these things. It is surprising how immediately the twin bombs occurred, list of people were already, I mean, what were they waiting for to get them anyway? Yeah. If they knew them from the word go.
Prevention.
So, exactly. So do you have to first wait for someone to die? Then you now say, okay, I think it is, we had this list of the other guys, I think maybe we need to now, and then there were images, back in the day there would be images, if they don't even make sense, those so-called sketches, they don't make any sense. And then you start telling you, when you see these guys here, know that they are the ones. No, that's not the way it is. So I want to agree with you, comrade, that we need to emphasize the need to have a more robust intelligence gathering system within our security circles, that the government needs to work closely with the citizens in order to get this information here. There is no way I am going to give information on who I don't know. So it's important. That's what I can say. Thank you so much, Godwin.
Thank you very much, Chanwat. Brian, thank you very much to all the other panelists. At this point in time, we are going to take a break, and then we shall come back and continue the conversation. Dear viewers, we ask that you subscribe to this very channel from which you're watching the conversation, and leave your comments just beneath so that you can always address them. Thank you. Let's meet you after the break. Welcome back, dear esteemed viewers of Civic Space TV. We continue with the second and final edition of our discussion. We hope you followed the first one. And again, we remind you to subscribe to this channel so that you turn on your notification bar so that you can always get notified when there are events that you may need to watch. So we are going to wind up this discussion, but let's first begin with Hawa Kimbugwe. How we've seen these madrasa schools. We've seen them mentioned often as places where young people are recruited, trained, indoctrinated, if I may call it that, and then sent to turned into killing machines, sent across the border to DRC, and then they come back and cause the mayhem we see in this country. If you are talking to a parent, if you're talking to a government like ours, what do you advise them to do with such a school as the madrasa? While the children have a right to learning, they can't have a right to learning terrorism if that terrorism is going to cause us problems. So how should the government go about this? When should they react? And if I were a parent, how can I know that this particular school is good for my kid and that other one may not be good because of what goes on there?
Okay. Like, we've been talking about recruitment, and it's happening at different levels, yeah. And now recruiters or violent extremist activists who are, drawing more people into violent extremism, they are using so many things. It's transforming, and the methods of recruitment are transforming. These days, someone can actually marry a woman and give birth to children that will be direct entrance into violent extremism. But for the thing of children and madrasa schools, it's important for parents, and this may be much as it applies to madrasa schools, I think it should apply to any school, because you do not know when your child is being targeted, and you don't know whether, even if the teacher is not the recruiter, the peers, the children your child is studying with, you don't know if they are already radicalized or they are children of radicalists or violent extremists. So among the first things that the parents should look around for is, you usually know your child and you know the values you want to instill in this child. And when you see that this child, as the child is growing up, they are a bit very very resistant or very discriminative, you hear it in their statements. You hear children growing up with, those ones are overkafiri, we don't play with them, or those ones are this. Already, just like anything else we learn in life, hate is taught. And when hate is taught, even the radicalization, the ideology or the beliefs that will, root the actions of, violence or extremism or terror will come from such subtle ways of, these people are this, and we do not deal with that. We cannot even tolerate such people. So those levels of intolerance, if a parent can, address them when the child is still young, and they know maybe these are the friends these children are having, or they should go to the school, even if it's a madrasa. Of course, sometimes the people that are teaching children in madrasa schools also tend to be violent, which is something I also do not agree with. Same thing at home. Parents sometimes are violent towards children. I was attending an interfaith space last Saturday, and there was this boy who said that our father beat us like his life depended on it. And he's like 26, but you feel like it's still there, like it's in his head. He was beaten, like that's violence. I do not agree with madrasa schools that are actually using violence to teach children or to ensure that the children master certain, tajweed or certain Quran or hadith, certain Islamic teachings. If this child is used to being beaten and being given punishments that are toxic, it will also get into their system that maybe violence is the way of life.
Okay.
And when they are getting into recruitment, it may be much easier for them. But even back at home, parents should ensure that they should create punishments that discipline, and not punishments that make someone hate themselves or doubt themselves or hate the world. Government, of course, we have to talk about the stakeholders. John C. Maxwell says that everything rises and falls on leadership. Because government is in charge of policies and systems that govern an entire state. And yes, they have come up with the national strategy. The Ministry of Internal Affairs under the National Technical Committee has come up with a national strategy on preventing or countering violent extremism that has 6 priority areas, and these priority areas are, tackling issues at different level, women, youth, and children. I think they should also try to mainstream children in their strategy, because this is now a new avenue that these terrorists or violent extremist groups are using to get people. Because when they radicalize a child when that child is still young, it's very easy for that child to remain part of them, because they are having hard time with now youth who are actually rethink something and say I won't go, or will second guess. A child may have no option. They may be born into it or taught it.
And it's the only
So
thing
they should create that strategy. In the implementation stages of that strategy, they should have certain criteria maybe, or certain mandates placed on madrasa schools, like madrasa schools, to ensure that these things are actually put into consideration when they are getting these children, the information they get from the children, and also the methods of teaching these children are actually looked into, so that these children, so that the government can, take play at that level,
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
So Zaga, you said that you came very close to being recruited. You had a friend and you've worked with youths in that regard. Now I want to know from you, if I am this student at school, or where I stay right now, or where I sleep in my hostel or hall at Makerere University, when should I become suspicious? And the police is saying that we have to be vigilant. At what point do I become suspicious and say, this neighbor to the left, there looks like there's something not adding up? When do I get to that point of being inquisitive? What are those warning signs that I should see?
Thank you so much once again. Before I tackle the question, I want to let us appreciate that the system of security in Africa and in Uganda in particular is a traditional way of dealing with issues. This is a traditional security that thinks about the hard power and hardware, where everything, that's why we have knee-jerk operations. Whatever happens, we run and respond. So yet today, for the countries that have been able to manage to a certain level terrorism, have been more of investing into what is called the human security. Today, our country is not investing in human security. It is investing in that traditional security where we believe in training more soldiers, equipping them, buying more tear gas and everything, forgetting the welfare of the individuals, even those they train as soldiers. So imagine a scenario whereby a police officer beats up a civilian because this civilian has failed to join the riot. What does that imply? Imagine a soldier kicking and beating and firing bullets to everyone, yet the operation is to calm down the violence happening. But this soldier then is going contrary to the orders and is just firing to everyone around. So what does it mean? It means before we even equip them with the tools of managing the state, we need to work upon their welfare and the mind. So most of our people in the uniform, most of our natives in Uganda, the mind is not worked upon, the welfare is not worked upon. For example, let me give you an example. I don't know whether you guys have been to Katwe or Kamocha or any other, and I've tried to diagnose the way how Kololo SS looks like and well stocked vis-a-vis Kololo High in Central, who has taken a tour around those schools. So if you go to the two schools, you will find that there is a total bigger difference in the equipping the schools, the teachers themselves, and everything. Then what do you want this young child who's going for school to Kololo High to think when they interact with the Kololo SS? Because they are both government schools. But why is it the equipping is different? Why is it that the manpower, the staff, the teachers, the levels are different?
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. The erratic and unpredictable reign of Uganda couldn't let us continue where we were. But they say, come rain or come sunshine, we'll continue. So we chose to go with that. And the conversation continues right here now under this shelter. And we hope that you've been following and you'll continue to follow as we proceed. So I'm going to ask Zaga to tell us how we can know. We live with people out there. We live with neighbors. Students in schools have friends. They have housemates. They have hallmates. They have people they share their hostels with, classrooms. So Zaga, from how from your interactions and engagements with people, your own experiences, how can one tell that neighbor A, neighbor B, neighbor to the left, neighbor to the right, neighbor opposite, or any of these particular neighbors in particular is problematic? Both the young people and the older people. When can they become suspicious so that it becomes easier for them to help the police, who have repeatedly reminded us that we need to be vigilant, we need to up our vigilance and ensure that we fight terrorism together with them?
Thank you so much. Before I respond to the question, I want to urge the government to change the security lens from the traditional to also incorporate the human security model, because times have changed and the entire world is shifting the paradigm to a new style of managing and handling issues of security. For example, we need, for our security agencies, I normally hear that within police, we have the community policing. And my question has always been, what are they doing exactly? Because this is part of their mandate to ensure that they interact more with than civilians, to ensure that at least there is that mutual working relationship to detect and tell the early indicators of these crimes. And as well, the government should be able, like the security forces, should be able to invest so much, not in the hard power, not in recruiting more soldiers, but in within the welfares of the individuals, the natives per se. Why do we have a line between Katwe and Kororo? Why do you have a line between Kisugu and Muyenga? Yet we are all citizens. Yes, we appreciate it. It wasn't the government's design, but at least it is the mandate of government to change the designs. These are designs for the colonial masters, but we have been in government for over some good years as black people taking the lead. So why don't we also change those kind of designs? Because, for example, Kato was designed as a black man's town that didn't have rules and regulations. Whoever could dive in there would do anything they felt like. That's why we have the escalation of violence and everything, and whatever notion you know about Katwe. So then what is the government doing to change that narrative in that space? So we can only change it by investing heavily in education, in health. Imagine a young person suffering from, for example, STIs, reaching Mulago, can't access services. What comes to their mind? If they are lured into terrorism, can't they participate? Because they go out with the hate. So I've seen many of young girls and boys losing their pregnancies because of the poor landscape of the health system, and they are cursing the government. So imagine that young person tapped into terrorism. What can they do? So I think if we can invest there, there is a lot we can do in terms of preventing what would be today the terrorism. But going back to the question, like my colleague said, that terrorism has no shape and form of dressing. You can't easily tell. But these definitions of long beards, dress code, they are not working, because a terrorist, I think one of the trainings they go through is camouflage training, like the way the military does it during war. So they know how to mingle and integrate themselves within the natives. And by the virtue that they can ably play around our mind in that arena, it is not easy for you to detect. For example, I've seen some good years back, I related with a friend I told you from Somalia, who was a terrorist. I related with him for over a year and going to his house as well. But I'd never seen anything to do with terrorism. And we've never had conversations around terrorism. But the only thing we would jazz about is work opportunities. But before I knew it, after escaping being lured, I saw in the news he was one of the people frontlined and listed as terrorists from the other side of Kansanga. So it is very hard for us to detect. But what we can do as natives, as government, can we have a mutual friendly working relationship besides the ranks, besides the level of education, besides the welfare capacity and the level of the wallet? Can we have these mutual collaborations in that what happens in Kamocha, for example, Toko in Muyenga can ably know and learn from there? Can we have platforms where when you go to police to alert them, you're not regarded as a criminal? Can we have platforms where I don't go to a police to alert them because I have a beard and I'm turned into a suspect? Then can we have rights for the suspects as well? Because people would volunteer, but if you're regarded as a suspect in the first place, we all know that you're going to be beaten. For example, one time, personally, I was kidnapped for 7 years on the last year's independence. Kidnapped for 7 days. sorry. But the 7 days, what I went through because of my beard, I can't tell. So even when I would love so much to volunteer to give information, but the notion around, the handling around people who are volunteering, and at the same time, the notion is tagged on to the Muslims, tagged on to the people that, you know, are suspected to be on the other side of security. It is not good, and it is demoralizing. So the people, the viewers, I would love to tell you that terrorism has no shape, has no dress code, has no, but we just have to be vigilant and we interrogate further. The onus is on the security, the local councils. We used to have vibrant local councils. Why can't they have a list of registers of their natives within that village? That is the first security spot. But if we are failing there, then we can't tell who a terrorist is. Thank you.
Okay, let's turn to Comrade Kidega. The National Youth Council is one of the most, how do I call it? It's one of the most ubiquitous organizations in the country. You have roots running up to the villages and then coming to the national level. That looks like a very rich resource that the government or yourselves organized can exploit to join and fight terrorism, maybe creating awareness, whatever you do. So how would an organization like yours work at this particular point in time and ensure that terrorism does not claim more victims in this country of ours called Uganda?
Thank you, comrade. I'll continue from where my colleague has ended, that as a country, we must continuously invest more money in intelligence. But also, this intelligence must be supported by cooperation of the people. We recall that the UK was able to notify our government of the looming or anticipated terror attacks. But I think our government was complacent about taking drastic action about it. But this shows us that it's important for us to build strong international relations, because it is through that kind of cooperation that we can be able to gather enough intelligence and be able to combat terrorism. Of course, like you already noticed, that the National Youth Council has a robust structure, right? From every village in this country has 9 committee members of the National Youth Council. So for someone to say that we become a viable option for government is entirely true. But you see, we can only do so much as an institution, because ideally the mandate to really handle security in the country is constitutionally guaranteed or given to a given state institution. But before I even go further into that particular discussion, let me mention something to do with families. And on this, I want to re-echo the words of Karl Marx, who said that families are the primitive of any society, and families reflect how societies and countries turn out to be. So as a government, as a people, we must invest a lot of resources in strengthening the institution of family. Because we all know that when a child reaches the age of 9, 10 years, it is hard to now impact or influence any given values in them. So parents and families have an opportunity to instill certain values in these children as they are growing up. But also, we must address our minds to the reality of the day, which is we live in a capitalistic society. That because schools these days only target profit making, schools cannot be an option for children to be educated. Okay, because all these schools care about is getting these students, pumping them with knowledge so they can pass the national exams and they attract more students. So the option then becomes the family. But the same families we are looking up to are the same families that are broken, are the same families that parents spend almost the entire day looking for money outside home. So I think the actual reality that we experience as a people is quite challenging, but we must continuously commit ourselves towards addressing them. But also, what do I think about how we think that as a people we can address some of these challenges that we are facing today, as, for example, terrorism? And well, he's a lawyer, and I'll have to speak about policy. we must deliberately enact policies that starve these terrorist groups from recruiting people from the population. Because these terrorist groups survive on the infantry that they get from the desperate communities of the ghettos, Kibera, Maratha, and amongst other ghettos. So government must enact policies or initiatives that deliberately constrain these terror groups from recruiting infantry, but also cut short their machinery and resource access, because they rely on these resources to guarantee their continuity. But also, lastly, with the growing technology and with the growing information age, these transnational terror groups have had a very favorable breeding ground. Because you know that whereas these terror groups that are transnational in nature cannot interface face-to-face, they rely more on the information age and the technology that is present. But also, the same technology that they rely on can easily be tracked by the national intelligence of these different states. So to me, I think it's a complex situation, really. Terrorism is evolving, it's becoming more complicated to deal with, but also at the same time, as a people, we must commit ourselves towards things like community policing and playing our role as citizens for the general collective good of the people.
Okay, let's move to Chanwat. Chanwat, you work with a civil society organization. Our brother here has one. She works with one, and I also work with one. I don't know about Kidega.
No.
He doesn't. So civil society organizations have traditionally even been a very big source of assistance to government in implementation of policy in areas like education, health. Now, if we have a threat like terrorism, how does the civil society sector come in? And what kind of help can they render to government to ensure that the challenge is addressed and nipped in the bud before it goes further?
Yeah, thank you very much. You stated it very well. Civil society used to be an alternative to government policies and all that, but not anymore. You've seen the shrinking civic space around us. We are being clamped down, accounts are closed, we are being closed. So, whereas our intention is not ill, but we're only speaking to the truth, I think this is sad in the ears of government or whoever is in charge. So we are no longer that alternative. However, we are still open to such alternatives. Now, I think civil society plays one of the biggest roles in helping government achieve its mandate. Civil societies are more of, if I'm to apply the notion of a visually impaired person who will wear glasses to see better, or someone short-sighted or long-sighted, and that can only be corrected by a pair of glasses, of course, scientifically. So it's important that we really appreciate that fact. Civil society, I think, can still continue to engage government and see that this war puts politics aside. This war puts any other issues aside, the issues of whereas we have those governance issues which are constant. But when it comes to terror, I think civil society needs to up its game and do more civic empowerment on the citizenry. We cannot do much. We don't control the police. We don't control the state resources. But even the little resources that we have that haven't been frozen by government yet, I think we can still use it to empower more young people, more Ugandans on this so-called vice here. I want to categorically agree with all the panelists that terror affects all of us. Yeah, and irrespective of who you are, even in civil society, I am sure if a bomb went off here, it wouldn't segregate and say this one is the opposition, the other one is government. You know, both if NUP and NRM would die, we would all die. So the notion that the fight seems to be for a chosen few should be dealt away with. This is a communal fight, a joint fight, which requires information from all corners, which I believe civil society can play a big part in connecting this kind of information, because I think civil society interacts more with the people than even you guys who have a grassroots of, you know, is it how many?
9 per
Nine.
village.
Yes, 9 per village. I think the impact of the work of civil society has been felt more than even government entities that are doing these things. I cannot tell you why, but because I think maybe you guys are not motivated enough, you guys are probably underfunded, or you don't know where your money goes. Yeah, so for us, I think we wouldn't want to hear of so and so has stolen this amount of money, so and so has taken that amount of money. This is the money that should be used or channeled to fight against vices such as terror, to fight against COVID-19. It is sad that the government is battling two fights now. COVID-19, which I think is relatively performing well, but because of maybe compliance of people. But I think the war on terror takes more than that. COVID will kill a few people, but terror will kill more and more people.
Are you sure about that?
I
Because
think
I would fear that terrorism actually kills the least, though it has the more impact that it sounds more than COVID would ever sound.
so. What is the difference if the impact is what we are talking about?
Because if
So I think that the impact is what we are addressing here.
yeah, if it's the impact, then I agree with you.
Yeah, so I, you know, all these things are preventive. So on the part of the civil society, I think there is more we can do in terms of bridging the information gap. But of course, we cannot do this without the government. The government needs to stop looking at civil society as an enemy. Actually, we are more, I don't know, we are key players in some of these engagements here. So I think there is more we can do in terms of bridging the gap between the government and citizens, interacting in terms of information sharing and gathering. But of course, the most important part has to be played by the individuals themselves. I'm a resident of a certain place, and so what do I do? What security tips do I have? And how do I share it with my colleagues? So it's more about how we take care of ourselves than actually before someone thinking for you. Yeah. So I think that's how it should be approached.
So you're going to move back like this, and now our time is fast spent. So you're going to begin the conclusion. I'll begin with you, Comrade Chanwat, then we come back this way. So just make your conclusion in a minute.
Yeah. As a Ugandan, I think, like many others, I am not happy because of the attacks on terror, because of the attack, I mean, the terror attacks and so many other challenges that have been, you know, felt by certain groups. For instance, I sympathize with the Muslims that have been targeted. It's really sad, but I want to call on to the stakeholders to take due course in terms of providing justice to you know, the victims of this of the terror, the suspects, and so on and so forth. So we need to look at our legal regime and see that we follow what the law says to the dot. We also have to look at terror in the other angle, that whereas terror is looked at as something against maybe government, but there are several things that have been in form of terror purportedly done by government agencies. For instance, the killing of these people. What is that? I think still almost the same thing, because lives have been lost. You are again killing more people.
I think it was the terrorists killed 6, and
Yeah.
then 5 were killed for trying to resist arrest.
Exactly. So this thing of we are putting you out of action, we are doing this and that, we need to get the political lens out of the way. I want to also acknowledge the November 18th and 19th of last year, where we saw scores of citizens, you know, losing their lives, and this is still unaccounted for. So would that qualify to be terror or something else? So we need to approach certain things in a certain way, that terror is not just someone anti-government going and getting, you know, an explosive device and taking the life of others, but also the truck what was the truck? That famous truck which cleared people, I think from the documentaries we've watched. So we need to focus more on having an inclusive, protective mechanism, both by government and also on the part of the civilians. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Let's get Comrade Kidega's conclusion.
I think my parting shots would be that, of course, to encourage collective responsibility. And to this particular argument, I would love to go back in 1918 when Woodrow Wilson introduced what he called the League of Nations. And the idea was that how can we as all nations collectively work towards a common security agenda? And that was, of course, informed by the continuous global conflict, the wars between the Soviet Union and the capitalistic and the Peloponnesian War, amongst other things. So in the same essence, I would love to call upon every stakeholder to play their role, because we can only combat this from a collective responsibility point of view. But also something that we forgot to discuss is the role of international society and the role of international organizations like the United Nations. I think that such institutions have a very fundamental role to play, because we can talk of things like diplomatic sanctions, economic sanctions to be levied on countries that are purportedly seen as instigating or supporting terror. So I think even international community has a very big role to play in combating terrorism, because they have the powers to levy sanctions, amongst other things. But also the political parties, their ideological orientation. There are some political parties that I will not mention that encourage radicalism. Okay, they encourage their youth to be radical and to be intolerant and to be defiant. Okay, well, maybe they have their views that are alternative, but there are other means of expressing them. So political parties that encourage radicalism also need to be, encouraged to move in the path of dialogue and constructive conversations. And I will mention the ANC, okay, when they were fighting against the apartheid, their leaders like the Walter Sisulus, like the Thabo Mbekis, encouraged them to be radical. And for such instances, you could understand. Because when the whites would say, blacks don't step onto this train, the Walter Sisulus would take young people on the same train. Okay, so it was a defiant approach that worked for them, yes. But I think with the current day and era, we need to encourage constructive conversations, encourage dialogue as a means of addressing misunderstandings or any conflict that arise. Because, conclusively, I would love to say that society proceeds by controversy. So having controversies is not exactly bad, but we simply need to have a point of cohesion that we can move forward together as a country. Thank you.
I was waiting for one part where you would say, like the NRA radicalized the youth, took them and they fought a government, then they died, and now they became a government. So like I said earlier, the question of terrorism and politics is very complex. Yeah,
the line is thin.
Yeah, the line is very thin, because governments around the world basically turn the opposition into terrorist organizations, even when they are legitimate. Yeah, they'll read through the line and say, this is terrorism. And terrorism is very easy to find. But if you gave the opposition perhaps in Uganda a chance and said, look, if there's any terrorism within the government, they will also find it. So when we politicize it, then we lose the bigger picture. That's what I was trying to avoid. Yeah, but I like how you brought it in. The political parties have a role to play, and they should ensure that youths are not radicalized to the point that they end up blowing themselves. Because when they do, we lose so much as a country. Let's move to Madam Kimbugwe Hawa.
Yes. Firstly, I would like for all of us to know that violent extremism and terrorism do not arise out of a vacuum.
True.
They are planned and they are valid. Or I think the people that perpetrate these things may have genuine and valid concerns and strong standpoints against which they stand to actually pursue these efforts. So I feel like this is not something we should be reluctant to address. Now that we are countering, we should, I believe, invest more time and efforts in preventing. And I think I would urge government to include peace building and conflict resolution courses or a subject, maybe in the education system, so that from a young age, maybe primary school education and high school education, pupils and students are actually learning about violence, violent extremism, terrorism, radicalization, de-radicalization, and disengagement, these early warning signs and everything to do with, because conflicts are inevitable. He just said that, society is fostered or developed by controversies. But then these conflicts, while controversies or conflicts are inevitable, they can be peaceful ways of addressing conflicts. And all these conflict resolution and conflict management mechanisms don't have to be violent.
True.
So And another thing, I think all of us have a responsibility as individuals, as families, as communities. Let's not just, be there saying government should help us. Government is playing its part. Let's also play our part. Okay, when I say Mwebededemu may be, it may be politicized, but everyone take the mantle, play your role. If you see something, if you see your brother, your sister, your child, your mom or your dad getting radical or, having certain ideologies while you're having the conversation, de-radicalize them or disengage them in that front. And as at community level, let everyone play the part they can play. And thank you for hosting me.
Okay, thank you. Let's move to Comrade Zaga.
Thank you so much. I concur with what my colleagues have said. And I just want to add that we just need to change the narrative. The government should be better positioned to appreciate which narrative do these terrorists trade before the young people. And then how do we counter and change that very narrative? If they are trading the narrative of giving them hope through commerce, why don't we create alternatives to give them the jobs within? If they are trading issues of religion, why don't we also counter that narrative by creating by creating a context that is well appreciative? Because some of these terror groups decontextualize some of these verses within the holy books. But for us who know about it, we just keep quiet. So why don't we get up? Why doesn't the government get up to speed to ensure that we counter that narrative around there? Then as well, for the parents and the viewers, I would still request and plead to you that let us be vigilant, because terrorism is within us and it is part of us. And it is here to stay, because a human being is a conflicting being. We need to appreciate that.
Okay.
Each time we say human being, just appreciate that there is a conflict. But then the question would be, how do we mitigate? How do we control? How do we prevent? So that is what we need to think about. The security agencies, I think it is high time for the police to learn from this. I know we've had very many lessons, but we've not implemented the actions. So this time around, let us implement actions by taking lessons from these bombings we've seen. Because before we know it, we are yet to see maybe some bombings, but just to know, at the end of the day, we must see other bombings in Kampala, in the city, because one, this killing of the suspects has not given information to who is planting at the other. So the greatest weapon of countering violence is information, and we are denying ourselves information because we are not scooping information, but we are putting suspects out of actions. Yet the information is very key. So, as a peace and conflict professional, I've always been telling the government that we are seated on a time bomb, and these are just sporadic engagements, but it doesn't mean Uganda is at peace. We are just at latent peace. The surface pretends to be peaceful, but inside people are boiling. Very many people are boiling. The Batembe is on streets. Everyone is boiling up. So let us intervene, a civil society, government, and everyone. Youth Council, the National Youth Council. I know we can use our structures to ensure that our young people are given the right and appropriate information, because they are just yearning for information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zaga. Thank you very much, all our panelists. Allow me to add my voice to those other voices and commiserate with the families that lost their relatives, those that got their friends and relatives injured. We put in our prayers and we wish them quick recovery. To the police officers, to the nurses at the hospitals, the doctors, and everybody doing their best to ensure that those that were injured, their lives are saved. We thank you very much. That is the spirit of being a Ugandan, the African spirit of Ubuntu. We hope that you continue along that right path. Those that watch us, we re-echo the words of the police that please be vigilant. Know when you need to engage the police and say there's something suspicious here. There's a bag that looks very suspicious. I think you should look out and check what's in there. The police have a budget for that, and they will never get tired of coming to check, because when they do, they can always save many more lives.
Yeah.
From this side of the Youth Roundtable, the host and the panelists, we thank you for always watching us. We pray that you continue to watch us. Please, down here is a click, subscribe to this channel, turn on your notifications so that you can always get notified when new videos have been uploaded. Thank you very much for this episode, and see you next week. All the best, and God bless Uganda.